The voicemail arrived at 11:47 a.m. on Tuesday. The woman's voice was polite, apologetic in a way that made my stomach drop before she finished her first sentence. "Mrs. Callaway, this is Patricia Hess from Meridian Title Company. I'm following up on the closing documents for the Lakeview property. Your husband mentioned you'd both be available Thursday, but I just need to confirm one thing. We have a second buyer listed on the deed alongside Mr. Callaway, and her name doesn't match yours. I want to make sure we have the correct information before we proceed. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, replaying the message twice, 3 times. The ceramic mug in my other hand had gone cold while I reviewed a client proposal. I set it down carefully, the way you set something down when your hands start shaking but you refuse to admit it. "Her name doesn't match yours. My husband had been at the office since 7, he'd said. I'd been married to him for 6 years. I was 38, a senior interior architect with 14 years of experience, and in the span of a 45-second voicemail, every quiet suspicion I'd ignored over the last 18 months lined up into something undeniable. I called Patricia Hess immediately. "Mrs. Callaway, thank you for returning my call so quickly," she said, relieved. "As I mentioned, we have the Lakeview unit listed under your husband's name and a Miss Jenna Farrow. We just need clarification. Has there been an amendment to the original purchase agreement? Our records show the initial deposit came from a joint account under both your names." "My joint account? The one my husband had suggested we open 3 years ago to streamline household finances. The one I'd poured a decade of savings into because he'd said it would simplify things. The one I hadn't checked in weeks because I trusted him completely. What was the purchase price?" My voice came out steady. I felt almost proud of that. She hesitated. "The agreed sale price is $420,000. Mrs. Callaway, is everything all right? I can hold the closing if there's a dispute." "No," I said, already decided. "Don't hold anything yet. I need a few hours. Can I call you back this afternoon?" "Of course. I'll be here until 5. I hung up and opened my banking app. The joint savings account balance, $6,042. 18 months ago, it had been just over $200,000. My contribution alone had been $160,000, earned through long nights, difficult clients, and years of building a reputation in a cutthroat field. I scrolled through withdrawal after withdrawal, each labeled vaguely: investment transfer, property deposit, escrow holding, development fund. Each signed off by him on a joint account that legally required only one signature. I did not cry. I noted that later. My first reaction wasn't grief but a cold, clarifying fury. A fire that didn't burn but settled into something far more useful. I remembered every time he told me I was being paranoid. Every time I asked about the account, he said he was managing it. Every time I mentioned saving for my own practice, he told me the timing wasn't right. "The market's uncertain. Let's wait another year." I thought of Jenna Farrow. I knew the name. My husband's company, Callaway Property Development, had brought her on 18 months ago as a project coordinator. He'd mentioned her twice, both times at work. "She's very organized," he'd said. Very organized. $420,000 of organized. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and did what I did best. I started building a case. The first thing I found was the property listing for the Lakeview unit. A 2-bedroom condo in a newly developed waterfront building, publicly listed before going under contract. Ridgeline Group, the development company, was behind it. A quick search of Ridgeline's registered partners showed my husband's name as a secondary investor. That meant he had a financial stake in selling those units, which meant he'd used our shared savings to purchase a property through his own business and put it in the name of a woman I'd never met. The second thing required a call I'd been putting off for months. My former mentor, Rachel, had left our firm 2 years before me to start her own boutique design studio. We'd kept in loose touch, holiday texts, the occasional coffee, but I'd let that friendship drift. Slowly, deliberately, encouraged by my husband's small, consistent remarks. Rachel's very career-obsessed. Probably not the most stable influence. "Don't you find her exhausting?" I had told myself I was just busy. Standing in my home office, heart hammering, I understood for the first time how deliberate that drift had been. She answered on the second ring. "Sarah. Oh my God, I was literally just thinking about you. I didn't have time for a warm-up." Rachel, I need to ask you something and I need you to be completely honest. A brief pause. The Hartwell contract. The one that went to Callaway Property Development 8 months ago instead of competitive bid. The interiors package sourced through an in-house design team I'd never heard of. Did you ever see the design boards for that project? Silence. Long enough for me to know. Her voice was careful. I saw them at a development showcase in the spring. They looked familiar, but I assumed it was just the style. Residential design trends overlap, you know? They were mine, I said. I did those concept boards 14 months ago. The Leland Avenue residential proposal. My husband helped me print the presentation materials at his office. I never won that contract. I assumed the client went another direction. Sarah. Those boards were presented as the work of Callaway's in-house team. The room felt very still. 14 years of building a professional reputation. Piece by piece, philosophy by philosophy, every detail of how I balanced structure with what I called emotional geometry, and it had been stolen. Those boards had taken 3 weeks. They were the pitch I was most proud of, the contract I had told my husband I was certain I could win. And now I knew exactly why I hadn't. I need documentation, I said. Anything you can share. Photos from the showcase, the program, anything with attributions. I'll go through my files tonight. Rachel's voice shifted, firm and focused. I had forgotten how fast she could move when it mattered. Sarah, how deep does this go? I don't know yet, I said honestly. But I'm going to find out. That evening, my husband came home at 7:15, carrying takeout containers and wearing the expression he used when he wanted to seem relaxed. I'd had 3 hours to compose myself. I'd spent them on the phone with my sister, who had driven over and sat at my kitchen table while I laid out everything I'd uncovered. Not once did she tell me I was overreacting. 2 years into my marriage, she had quietly said she thought something felt off. She'd accepted my defense of him with more grace than he deserved. She had a long memory and did not gloat. She simply held my hand across the table and said, "Tell me what you need me to do." What I needed was for her to leave before he got home. And she did. "Long day," he said, setting the food on the counter. "Just tired," I replied. "How was the Meridian closing prep?" He moved toward the refrigerator and I watched the back of his neck. "What Meridian title? I thought you had paperwork this week." "Oh," he said, pulling out 2 glasses unhurried. "Nothing major." He set the glasses down and met my eyes with that look he'd perfected over the years. Warm, slightly concerned. The look that said I was the center of his attention and nothing else in the world mattered. I had loved that look once. I had built entire rooms around the feeling it gave me. "You seem tense," he said. "Did something happen at work?" "No. Everything's fine," I said. He believed me. In that moment, I understood exactly how thoroughly he had underestimated me. I decided to let him continue doing that for as long as I needed. The following 6 weeks were the most disciplined of my life. I did not confront him. I did not move money or make obvious changes. I maintained every routine, dinners, weekend plans, the small domestic choreography of a marriage. Beneath the surface, I worked with a focus and precision I hadn't brought to anything in years. For 18 months he had convinced me my best professional instincts were too ambitious, too risky. Now those instincts were exactly what I needed. The first call I made was to a family law attorney, Donna Vega, recommended by Rachel for cases involving financial fraud within marriages. I met her on a Thursday afternoon, when my husband believed I was at a material showroom. I laid out everything. The title company voicemail, the bank account withdrawals, the design portfolio theft, the timeline. Donna listened without interrupting. "The account withdrawals are significant," she said. "Depending on how the transactions were classified, this could constitute financial fraud within the marriage. The IP theft is a separate matter, but it strengthens your overall position. Who holds the rights to those original concept boards?" "I do," I said. "Original files, dated and watermarked on a hard drive at my studio. I also have the client correspondence from the Leland pitch proving I created the work independently." She nodded. "Good. Do not touch any joint assets yet. Do not signal that you know anything. Start building a complete financial record." I was already doing all 3. By the 3rd week, I had documented every withdrawal from our joint accounts over the past 18 months, cross-referenced with public property records. My husband had purchased not one but 2 units through Ridgeline Group using our shared savings. The Lakeview condo in Jenna Farrow's name, and a smaller studio unit registered to a holding company I traced to him as sole director. He'd never mentioned it. The unit appeared to be generating rental income deposited into an account I hadn't known existed. By week 4, Rachel had sent me photographs from the development showcase, 3 separate program booklets attributing my design work to Callaway Property Development's in-house design team, and a contact at a trade publication who confirmed the project had been featured the previous fall with the same false attribution. I had the evidence. And now I had a plan. My attorney forwarded the documentation to an intellectual property specialist she worked with. The assessment was blunt. My work had been commercially used and publicly attributed to another entity without my consent. The financial value of that misattribution in terms of the contract it helped secure was substantial. During those weeks I also began to rebuild. I reached out to Rachel properly for the first time in 2 years. Coffee, then lunch, then a long conversation about her boutique practice. She had 3 major residential projects in development and a reputation for collaborating with independent designers. When I mentioned I had quietly been considering branching out on my own, she set down her cup and looked at me, equal parts warmth and exasperation. "I tried to recruit you 2 years ago," she said. "Do you remember?" I remembered. My husband had been the one to explain why the timing wasn't right. "The timing," I said, "is right now." 2 weeks before I was ready to act, he came home in unusually good spirits. A new commercial development in the Riverside district, he said, a significant contract, a step forward for his company. He was taking me to dinner to celebrate. He poured wine, stood in the kitchen with that familiar warm, centered look and spoke about our future, the things we'd build together. I sat across from him and understood with perfect clarity. He was celebrating something that partially depended on my silence. I smiled. I told him I was proud of him. The following Monday I began. At 8 a.m. I called Patricia Hess at Meridian Title, informing her I was disputing the Lakeview transaction, citing the use of joint account funds without my knowledge or consent, and that my attorney would be in contact by the end of business. Patricia, to her credit, did not seem entirely surprised. At 9 o'clock, Donna filed an emergency motion to freeze the joint accounts and any assets acquired through them in the past 24 months, pending a formal financial review. At 10 o'clock, the IP specialist sent a formal cease and desist to Callaway Property Development regarding the unauthorized commercial use of my design work, with an attached damages valuation. At 11 o'clock I called my husband's business partner, Gerald, a man who had always seemed uneasy with certain aspects of their arrangements. I calmly detailed everything I had uncovered. Gerald asked for 48 hours. I gave him 24. The previous weekend, I had moved my personal documents and the hard drive containing my original design files to my sister's house while my husband was at a golf outing. I took nothing else. The life we had built in that house, the furniture I had chosen, the renovations I had overseen, the careful architecture of a home I had shaped with my hands, I left exactly as it was. Some things you leave behind not because they don't matter but because carrying them would slow you down. At noon I sent him a single email. Subject line: I know everything. 4 attachments: Donna's emergency filing, the IP cease and desist, a summary of every financial transaction I could trace, and the deed records for both properties. At the bottom 3 sentences. I have retained legal counsel. My attorney will be in contact with yours. Do not call me, contact Donna directly. I was sitting in Rachel's studio when my phone rang. I watched my husband's name appear and did not answer. It rang 4 more times over the next 15 minutes, then stopped. His voicemails went directly to Donna. His texts, many of them I forwarded without reading. What followed unfolded over several months, but it can be compressed, because procedural detail is never the heart of the story. The financial forensics were worse than I had anticipated. Over 18 months he had moved just under $200,000 from our joint accounts into property investments and a separate business account without my knowledge or consent. The legal standard for marital financial misconduct in our state was clear, and my documentation was thorough. Donna described it as unusually well organized for a first disclosure. I'm an architect, I told her. I understand the importance of documentation. The IP case moved separately but in parallel. I had built the evidence. Now it was time to see it work. The commercial contract secured with my design work was worth far more than the original land pitch I had lost. The damages my attorney put forward reflected both the direct financial gain my husband's company had reaped from my stolen work and the professional harm of having it attributed elsewhere. His attorneys pushed back hard. We negotiated for 11 weeks. Gerald, my husband's business partner, cooperated fully once he understood the scope of what had been done. He had not known about the IP theft and refused to defend it. Jenna Farrow, I learned through Donna, had not known the full source of the funds used to purchase the Lakeview condo. She had assumed they were my husband's personal savings. Convenient or true, I couldn't say. What I knew was that she was not my focus. The person I held accountable for my situation was the one who had made every choice that put me there. 6 months after I sent that email, I sat in Donna's conference room and signed the final divorce settlement. It included a full return of my financial contributions with interest, damages from the IP case, and my husband's agreement to formally correct the attribution on all published materials featuring my work. I also walked away with the deed to a small townhouse I had identified 18 months earlier, which my husband had dismissed as not worth the investment. I had been right. The day after signing, I met Rachel for lunch. She ordered champagne before I could suggest something modest. When the glasses arrived, she raised hers and looked at me with pure, uncomplicated happiness. "I know this wasn't the plan you started with," she said. "No," I agreed. "But this was always who I was." She tilted her head. "You know that, right? The woman who spent 6 weeks building a legal case while making dinner every night. The person who called Patricia Hess back in 30 seconds, completely composed. That was you. That's always been you." I thought about the version of myself from 18 months earlier, the one who stopped asking about the bank account, let friendships fade and silenced professional ambition under the guise of marriage. Each small concession had seemed reasonable at the time. The sum of them had been something I would never have agreed to if I had seen it all at once. "I know," I said differently than I would have a year ago. Not as reassurance but as fact. The first project I took on independently was a residential renovation in Whitmore. A 1940s bungalow for a woman who knew exactly what she didn't want and was less certain about what she did, often where the best work begins. I spent an afternoon walking through the space, asking questions, taking notes, feeling the particular pleasure of a room waiting to become something. 3 months later, Rachel and I formally launched our collaborative practice. The announcement landed well. Several former clients reached out immediately. A trade publication that had once featured my stolen work contacted me for an interview. I spoke honestly about what I had learned over the past 2 years, without performing the wound of it. What I had learned was considerable. What I intended to do with it was even more so. The townhouse needed work, which was convenient. I drew the plans myself. My sister came over on weekends, helped strip old wallpaper, we played music too loud, ordered pizza, and talked the way we had before, deliberately keeping distance from the past, intentionally close in the present. Sometimes I thought about Patricia Hess's voicemail. 11 minutes had reorganized everything I believed about my life. I had not asked for this. I had not seen it coming. But surviving it had revealed something I wanted to say to anyone who had ever stood where I had. In that silent moment when you realize the person you trusted most was making plans you knew nothing about. You are more than what was taken from you. You are the one who built it in the first place. The same hands that built it once can build something better. I signed my name on the townhouse blueprints in the lower right corner, the way I signed every set of plans. Clean, confident, entirely my own.